Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's discussion webinar. On webinar, we'll find out on composable content for marketers. I'm Nicole France. I am Director of Content here at Contentful, and I am very pleased to be joined today by two of my illustrious friends and colleagues, Liz Miller, who is Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and Justin Gonzalez, who is not just Justin from the Block, he is Global Head of Customer Empowerment, and that applies to all of Block, but specifically what you guys might know and love as Square. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, Justin, both for being here.
You bet. Now all I want to do is hum. I'm just Justin from the Block. It's going to be what goes through my head for the next hour.
I don't think we paid for those rights, though. We're going to have to figure that
out. It's okay. She only gave a few seconds of it, Justin.
Cool. Right, Spanish content.
Exactly. All right. So before we get into the really fun discussion here, I'm going to start, because I too am a former analyst, and Liz knows this very well, with a little bit of context setting definitions. Okay, so we're here to talk about composable content. What the heck is this stuff? Here's the deal. Composable content is a new way of thinking about and working with digital content. Why, you might ask? Why do we need this? I mean, it's not like digital channels are really all that new. You're right, they're not. But the degree to which digital pervades all of our daily lives, professional and personal, the cacophony of noise. I mean, really, we're talking about so much noise across all of these digital channels, and not just online, right? I mean, like the boundary line between what's digital and what's in person is completely blurry these days. So we really need, as marketers, as businesses, a different way of thinking about and working with this content, because it's not just about what's on the website. It's not just about what's on the mobile app or how we're engaging through social media or, I mean, boring stuff, but important stuff like email marketing. All of these things, before we even get to the really fancy stuff like gaming communities, in-game promotions, all the kinds of things that we might be doing across various media formats, across different kinds of channels and digital platforms. It's a lot, right? So we need to be thinking about this in a very different way, because in order to get that cut through, in order to be successful, we need to be able to manage all of this stuff at scale. When I say scale, what I mean is not just how many visitors you have to a website, but I'm talking about things like the number of different digital experiences that you're creating, the number of platforms, the number of channels, but also teams and organizations, geographies, languages, and let's not forget the audiences that we're trying to engage in the first place. So there is a tremendous variety of parameters of scale that we're trying to operate on. We also want to be fast because opportunities arise quickly. We need to be able to experiment and iterate rapidly. We need to see what really is going to drive impact and capture the attention of the audiences we want to engage, not just for individual transactions, but to build those long-term relationships. And all of that means that we have to have some better ways of framing what we do and operating effectively, and also some different tools to help us to get that cut through, to drive consistency, to drive that operational efficiency, and honestly, to make the work that we do way easier and better. Because I'll tell you this, and I suspect that I will get vigorous nods from Liz and Justin both on this one, marketing has, in particular, never suffered from a lack of really good ideas. The challenge has typically been our ability to execute on those ideas. So this is where composable content really comes into play. Let me share with you 6 core attributes of composable content. So the first one, as you might have guessed, is that it works across digital channels. And what we mean by that is that we aren't talking about a system that is tied to a specific channel, like a website or like a mobile app, or even to a social channel, for example. We're talking about the ability to work across all of those channels and platforms from one place. The way we can do that is by leveraging structured content. If you've ever heard the term content modeling, you'll have some idea of what that is. That's actually a pretty big and in-depth topic. We can touch on a little bit in this conversation today, and I've got some resources you can follow up on if you're interested in learning more about that also. But it's not just about structuring content. It's about thinking about how we consider reuse, and reuse in a number of different ways. Certainly content reuse is a big part of that. And when you structure content effectively, it makes it really easy to reuse content elements in any sort of combination or permutation that is appropriate for wherever you're going to use it. So whether it's in a specific experience, again, a particular channel, or with a particular audience that you're trying to engage with, it gives you those building blocks to compose what you're trying to deliver to your customers or to any other audience for that matter. The other really important aspect of this, and I'll come back to this in a big way in just a moment, is that we need to be able to connect content from various sources as well. Content doesn't only come from one place, either in terms of organization structure and teams or even systems. So we need to be able to unite that content wherever it might be. And at the same time, back to this idea of scale, we've got a lot of different people and teams that are trying to work together toward a common objective, engaging customers, selling more, telling a really compelling story, however you want to articulate it. Yet as individuals and teams, we have distinct roles, and we have our own sort of areas of responsibility and priority and focus and expertise. We need to be able to work independently in those areas of expertise without stepping on any colleagues' toes, but also without being dependent on them in order to get our own work done. So one of the most often cited scenarios we see is where content teams or marketing teams are really dependent on developers to make any content changes. That's a problem. So that's an important area that composable content helps to address. But it also means that things like marketing teams and legal teams and HR teams, who are all responsible for different kinds of content, can work in their own domains as well. And, someone can't accidentally change the price on something they don't have the authority to change, or modify something that is probably a legal term and condition that could have very big implications if it isn't absolutely signed off and blessed by the legal team, for example. So independent work, but still coordinated. So we're all able to work within our domains, whether we're developers or content teams of some description. We're all working toward that common goal. We can collaborate as and when we need to, but we still get to do our own thing too. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I can see we have a lot of comments that are coming in already, and I want to say, keep them coming, folks, because today is all about conversation and discussion. And so on that note, Justin, please tell us a little bit more about you and your role at Square and Block, and how you view composable content and what that means for you in your role, but also for Square as a business and the way it engages with customers.
For sure. So I like to start by admitting I am a recovering marketer turned customer experience advocate and leader. Why I say that is because in the world of marketing, as I was in it many years ago at this point, I started noticing and identifying this concept of content as an ecosystem, your brand as an ecosystem, all of these elements kind of covering, the vast array of the customer experience. And so coming into the actual customer success function at Square, what I'm really working to do is collaborate and connect every part of our business that's creating the content we're talking about, whether that's marketing content, sales content, account management, product has their own content. To your point, Nicole, HR, finance, legal, like all of these teams are creating content. There's this massive ecosystem. And when you think about the customer experience, it ranges all the way from awareness through to retention and even churn. So how do we ensure that at every point in that process, at every touch point in that journey, we're telling a consistent narrative, that we're focused on empowering our customers, and that we're using content in repeatable ways to ensure that there is that consistency, but of course that we're reducing, if you will, the amount of bandwidth, the amount of oversight or even the amount of energy and effort it is to create and maintain that content. So that's really how I approach it. Within my organization, we're looking at, yes, the support center, but we're also looking at how support center interacts with the marketing website. How does that interact with our in-product experiences, whether you're in the application or in your dashboard? How do we ensure that we're catching you with the right content at the right time in the right channel to help unblock you or to help push you faster towards realizing whatever your vision or your dream is? And so that's kind of how I think about content within my part of the world within Square and Block. And I'm excited to have this conversation with everyone today.
Oh, this is going to be good. So Justin, what I love about your story and the approach that you take to this as a recovering marketer, which, let's face it, I think we can all relate to a little bit. Liz, I know you're there on that one. But you really have taken a different approach to thinking about customer service even and customer support. And, I guess we're all familiar with the adage that sometimes causes us a little grief as marketers, that everyone's job is marketing across the business, but that's very literally true for you and your team as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, like as I was kind of preparing for this conversation and thinking about the pieces I wanted to touch on, it's like on the marketing side, we talk so much about like our brand is this and these are the colors and this is the vibe and this is the atmosphere and like this is our brand. The reality is your brand is the story your customers tell to other people. And it takes a real like reality check to kind of take a step back and say like, gosh, well, if I'm an airline, my brand is dependent upon every touch point in that experience. That means we need to be on time. That means the seats need to be comfortable. The service needs to be great, like blah, 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 blah. All of those things impact that brand. And it's the same when you start thinking about that content, because if your content is a jumbled mess and marketing is over here selling this dream, customer success is over here trying to correct the reality, and there's a disconnect between those two organizations, your brand is messed up. Like that's not the thing you want to be putting out into the world. And so that's ultimately like how I'm thinking about it, is how do we make sure that at every touch point in the journey, again, from awareness all the way through to retention, and yes, churn. We don't talk about churn enough because how you break up with someone matters too. I know, Liz, I told you this was going to be a kiki.
I know. I was going to say, Liz, okay, I feel like we need to kick it over to you here, because I know one of your big hobby horses is this idea that we need to stop the random acts of customer experience.
Yes. I mean, the random acts of experience are painful. They are everywhere. They do usually start also with that one person who's like, I'd be great at marketing because I'm really good at a party. You're like, nope, stop it. Nope, no, that's not what we do. That's not our job. But you're right. I mean, the reality is that like, if we're talking about the three horsewomen of customer experience, and it's sales, service, and marketing, and we are charging into the abyss together, that's really hard when you're still playing the corporate game of don't touch my button. Right. And we all know that game, right? Like sit around a board table and like just toss out a fun one. Like, hey, everyone, I really want to change the YouTube channel. And all of a sudden everyone's like, no, you cannot touch my button. Right. And everyone kind of freaks out about it. But I think you hit it right on the head, Justin, which is it's not only is your brand what your customers articulate about you, but it's the story that tells what they bought from you, why they come to you, why they engage with you, that they can't get anyplace else. And I think we get so caught up in it's our product. So then we need these 10 things of content, like the checklist. And all you B2B marketers out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about, the content checklist. Like we have a really big product launch. And so we need these 97 product sheets that all say the same thing, but they have a slightly different color because now they're by industry. Like we get so caught up in this checklist that we forget the fact that our brand is also a chorus of storytellers. It's this kind of big, large moment of oral history, right? And I think we forget that everyone is part of the chorus. And so when service is dealing with the person who just rage agented out on, zeroed out on the phone, and that poor person, bless them in the contact center, right, is just trying to say, no, really, this is why we want to stay together. Please don't break up with me over the phone, right? Like they're having that moment of angst and grist. All of that information, all of that is part of the next story that marketing is going to tell, right? It's part of the next story that the poor person at the front desk is about to tell. And if they don't have access to, or if they can't be part of the creation process, you're not actually capturing the essence of your brand. You're not actually telling the story. You're just like shouting into the wind and or navel gazing, which are two prime sports that, I'm saying about my own people, marketers are really, really good at. Like we're really, really good at being like, our website is perfect.
And it's a great reflection of how we're organized internally and not anything that makes sense for our customers or any other audiences. Yes, I think, virtual hands up, people, if this is something you see as well. Okay, I want to do two things right now. One is acknowledge the amazing group of people that we have joining us today from literally all over the world. So thanks everybody for showing up in, some really incongruous time zones in some cases. We appreciate you here live. And so I want to also now take one of the first questions that we've gotten in here from Jorge, which I think is actually a really, really important and pertinent one. How do you articulate different sources of content and keep a visual and editorial style or narrative so it does not look like a patchwork? Okay, this is a big, big challenge. And I want to just start this by saying, when we talk about different sources of content, Justin, you're a great case in point here, because we don't classically think of customer service or customer support as marketing content. And yet, in a lot of cases, what you guys are doing is creating stuff that either draws from marketing or even informs and contributes to marketing content. So part of the answer here is, how do we think holistically about content, where it is, and what it means from across the organization, right?
Where I will start is by saying, I think this is really where composable content plays a huge role. Because we have the ability to repurpose content that's created by marketing. And in the same way, marketing can repurpose content that's created by my team on customer experience. Because we create these really tight bonds, like ultimately what it's going to come down to, so many of my answers today, y'all, if you just want to tune out now, create, force, whatever you got to do. It is a partnership. You have to create a really, really tight connection between your two teams. We talked a little bit about like marketing operates in one silo, customer success in another silo, don't touch my button. I have a potty mouth, so like I apologize in advance. I realize this is being recorded. But what I will say is like, forget all of that, but I have a different 4-letter word I would have used.
Justin, I think you were looking for ducking, forget that.
Yes.
I think that's,
yes.
Okay.
Walk
got
that
you.
down.
I got you there.
The point is like it requires intense and intentional collaboration between the different functions. And in addition, it requires a group of people who acknowledge that although our KPIs, although our goals as independent teams may be different, we are all on the same team working towards the same thing, which is probably to become the legendary brand in our space. The sooner you realize that, the sooner you get everyone on board with that concept, that if we all work together, we are stronger as one than divided as many. That is how you keep consistency in your visual and editorial style. So again, for us, it really comes back to the power of this composable content platform that allows us to borrow and to share the content that we're creating. And because we're doing that, we don't have to have bloated teams. We don't have to have bloated processes. We can all collaborate and partner together towards telling that narrative in unison as a chorus.
It's really interesting because I feel this very acutely in my job here at Contentful, because my team, the content team, is not the only team across Contentful that's creating a bunch of really good content. And we spend a lot of time trying to coordinate together. So for example, with our learning services team, who have some great courses I highly recommend on things like content modeling, which are actually core to preventing this from being a patchwork. The other aspect of this, so it's coordination, it's about content modeling that actually looks across the scope of not just our teams internally, but how this content is used and where it's used. So that's another key factor. The other thing is, at a very practical level, when you're separating content from where it gets displayed, that allows you to do a couple of really important things. One is model content effectively, as I've touched on, but the other is to create some really good design systems that apply across those digital channels, right? So you don't just have a design system for the web. You probably have a design system for the entire visual identity of the organization, and you can apply that in a lot of different ways. And sometimes you can actually even combine the two. When it comes to doing fairly straightforward stuff, like, I don't know, creating a promotional banner with different layers. But we'll save that for another conversation. Liz, talk to me a little bit about what some of the organizational challenges we see across marketing. Because in marketing, part of the problem, and not just, in marketing, but across these different teams within the organization too, we tend to be very organized by channel.
Yeah. We get super rigid. And I think that also goes back to this idea of like, how does everything not look like a patchwork? Okay, listen, here's the reality. Louis Vuitton charges a lot for a bag that is a patchwork. Like sometimes patchworks can be okay. Like I think we get so freaked out like that everything's going to look like a hodgepodge and we're going to, oh my God, what if it's not the real blue? I mean, I used to work for an organization way back in the day. And it was the organization was owned by the same group that owns the LA Lakers. And we always used to laugh because like, if you were to ask anyone walking down the street of Los Angeles, the streets of LA, what color do the Los Angeles Lakers wear? People would be like, purple and gold, purple and gold. And everyone who worked at the organization would immediately come back with this visceral reaction of, it is not purple and gold. It is Forum blue and Forum yellow. Like you would freak out, right? Because there's a brand standard and that brand standard says that I have a custom color. And here's that, like, you knew you could shout the hex code from the top of a building because you'd freak out, right? And I think we get so focused in like, it can't be a patchwork. It can't be a patchwork. It has to be exactly on brand standards. And I'm sorry, like, unless you work at Coca-Cola where red is really important to your brand, like you feel it, if like that's not Coca-Cola red, you feel it to your soul. Is like a patchwork might be okay. Like you're not gonna, like, it's not gonna be so bad. Like just did you spell block correctly? Like it's gonna be like let's start there and then not be so super precious about it, because I think the more we get rigid and the more we start to get that like brand police hat on where we're like, you did not get the right blue. Like that is not the right grade. The gradient starts at 10%, not 20%. Like if we're there, we're going to organize all of our content by channel and we won't be able to get out of it, right? Because when you start creating those hard lines of rigidity and you start to think of process as being so like it's made out of titanium, we're never going to change it, you're never going to be able to flex to this idea that not only can content be created anywhere, but then it extends for marketers, right? Because if content can't be created anywhere, guess what also can't be created anywhere? Data. Guess what also can't be created anywhere? Experiences. So if we're going to organize our whole life by channel, we are going to miss our customer. Because at the end of the day, there is not a single customer on this planet that ever thought to themselves, you know what? I really love when merchants I work with have Square, but I only like it when it's to brand standard. And I only like it when I can see the logo facing out. And by the way, I only like it through the email channel and the social channel because, oh my gosh, all of the other channels are so wrong. Like no one thinks like we're the only ones, like we're the only ones that do this.
Well, it's interesting. And Jorge's got a couple of follow-up points here. And we also had, Alyssa added that it's difficult, to patch together different teams since no one knows what the other one is doing. So clearly a big part of this is communication. And this is where we get to something that, you can put under the heading of content operations or content ops. And we certainly see a lot of organizations starting to recognize this and invest in it as a crucial part of how companies organize. But, Jorge, you're right. There are plenty of ways for there to be confusion around the narrative, around the visual identity. And I think what it comes down to is a couple of things. One is having the volition and the mindset that is, to what Liz has just said, we are all working together, but we are not necessarily setting such strict boundaries that there's only one person or one team who can do anything. And I go back to the idea of systems, whether it's design systems or a composable content platform, or a story world that's informing how you create those narratives and how they're interrelated. These are all systems that help us to do a couple of really important things simultaneously. One is be consistent, because we have those references. We know what good looks like. We know what the actual hex codes on the colors are, regardless of what anyone calls them. So actually, we can go and riff on that and know that we're still within the brand visual guidelines, for example, right? So part of it is consistency. But the other part of it, and this is where I'm going to go out on a limb and say, this is a big part of the mindset change of composable content, is recognizing that we actually need to give the freedom and the creative opportunity to a whole lot of people across the business and across different marketing teams, the ability to go and create within those guidelines. And it may be that they've got the messaging that's already set, and we actually have that articulated in our composable content system. We have the brand guidelines in a design system, so there are elements that someone can go and create with them. You know, we are clear on what the story world is that we're defining those different narratives for. So even if you have something like, you know, the Colonel Sanders manga dating game video game, which absolutely exists, and it's got its own weird visual identity. Yeah, we'll follow up on that later, Liz.
Have to hit pause.
Yes, I know, but like, that still fits within the story world of Kentucky Fried Chicken and Colonel Sanders. You know, like, these things fit together. They don't have to be 100% correlated, because they're actually going to draw in different audiences from different places with different priorities. And so we need that freedom. We need that flexibility. We need to inspire that creativity and actually not only let it happen, but empower it with tools that ensure that we've got enough consistency where it really matters, but we have the freedom to go out and do this at speed and at scale. Justin, is this sounding like crazy talk from where you're coming from?
No, the Colonel Sanders thing, right?
Yeah, the Colonel Sanders thing, like, I want to live in that reality. That just sounds like greasy and delicious. But in any case, in the reality that I do live in today, I think it's really true. It's about, how do brand teams do a better job of creating the guardrails, right? Like, I think of it as like the bumper lanes when you're bowling. How do you create those guardrails so that people can still have fun, they can still enjoy themselves, but they can still hit the mark, or at least get close enough to it, right? But also acknowledging that how your brand shows up in different channels might be different. How we're going to talk on our support center, where I have technical documentation, it's how-tos, it's FAQs. We're trying to get someone to an answer really fast. I'm not using flowery language. We're getting to the point. We're getting you the answer to your question. How I show up on TikTok is going to be a completely different side of my brand. And so I think it's also acknowledging that, like, within each of these spaces, you can be a little bit of a different person or a little bit of a different representation. But because you have those guardrails in place, we all know that we're aiming for the same target.
Yeah, so true. Because I mean, like, think about, like, it. Everyone loves a little structure, right? Like, everyone likes to know what the general rules are.
Liz has a 5-year-old, so she can confirm. Yes, structure is key.
Right. But I think the other thing is, and I think it's especially important because right now we're sitting with a very international audience. And I think that for those of us who have worked in global organizations and global marketing teams before, we know that pendulum of content control and creativity control swings wildly if you're out in one of the regions, right? So all of a sudden, 1 minute, it's like HQ in North America is like, we shall control everything. We are the content overlords. And then all of a sudden, like, you get this content and you're out in the regions and you're like, this will make no sense for anyone who is in one of my audiences. I'm never going to be able to have this as a digital experience here. None of these words make sense. Like, did you even check to see if it was Brazilian Portuguese? Right? Like, it's all of those types of things are going to come up. But when you have those guardrails, and I know I got some folks in Dublin out there listening right now, like, listen, I'm part Irish. If left to my own devices, I will do lots of crazy things with content. Like there will be lots of random acts of content if I don't have the guardrails up, right? I blame it on the Irish part. But I think that I think that when you have those guardrails up, when you have that opportunity, and then you give everyone permission. And I think that's the other part we don't often talk about, right? It's not just about setting up those operational guidelines. I think content operations wildly important. It is going hand in glove with this evolution of what marketing operations is as a whole. We've got new metrics, we've got new measures, we've got new intelligence that's actually driving that stuff back up into the business. And I think that when you have those practices in place, you then have to say to the organization, hey, everyone, here's the song we're singing. You have permission to go do your Mariah Carey riff, but we're all coming back here for the chorus, right?
Like, yeah, and it better be in tune. It better be
in tune. Go do it, and you can like do the whole thing, right? It's totally cool. But like, we're all going to come back here and be normal for the chorus just for 10 seconds. But you need that guardrail, but you also need permission.
Yeah, and maybe a little auto tune. Just saying. Yes.
Well, okay. It's interesting. You heard me sing Justin from the Block, right? We need a lot of auto tune.
There's a reason why Liz and I did not sing the intro here. But like you're pointing to something, Liz, that I think is really important. Is actually one of the questions that Mario asked, which is examples of good organizations doing this composable content thing. Obviously, Justin is here for a reason, but let me give you another one that's picking up on exactly what Liz said. So, Costa Coffee is a great example. When, very well known across Europe from the UK. But when they started expanding into other countries, what they realized is it wasn't just a question of translating what they had, right? I mean, like the nutritional values of coffee are the same wherever it goes, but Japan, there's a lot more about like the origin of the coffee, and Germans care a lot more about all the technique that goes into roasting it and how it's made. So when they were optimizing their new sites for Germany and Japan, it wasn't just a question of translating that content. It was actually ensuring that what they presented and how they presented it, even though the content was the same, was organized based on what they knew those audiences were most interested in finding. And so the content elements are the same. The structure of how it gets presented and which things are most prominent are different by country. So that's just one example. I mean, Justin, tell us a little bit about how it works within Square, because you guys are coordinating a ton of stuff. And I mean, like, yeah, you guys do all the merchant transaction stuff, but like a huge amount of what you guys actually do as a business is content, right?
Exactly. So as you were kind of talking about like the globalization needs, one thing that I would build on that as I think about Square and our journey towards a more global business, or towards becoming a more global business, as we're entering new markets, we're creating similar content, but we also have to recognize that our customers in these new markets are going to be at a different stage of maturity. We've been around in the US now for over a decade. Our customers are very mature. We have a lot of complexity. They've adopted many different parts of our ecosystem. What we say here in the United States, and again, if I'm just looking at it from our support center standpoint, what we're trying to do there is very different than what we need to do for folks in our Irish market, or folks in our Spanish market, or the Portuguese market. Like the things that we do in the support center for these spaces become completely different, because rather than teaching someone who's adopted a dozen different products within the ecosystem how all of these things connect, we're trying to teach someone the basics. We're trying to get someone onboarded with the general understanding of like, what does it mean to have access to this ecosystem of payment solutions that go beyond just accepting a transaction and allow you to also process your payroll and manage your employees and do timesheets and inventory tracking and blah, 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 blah. Similarly, what people care about in those markets does differ between the US and other places. And so we also have to be thinking about that. But it's also thinking about the maturity of the market, where we're at in that maturity model. And then how are we speaking to our customers in different ways? So that's just one example of how we think about it from, again, the support center side. What's the goal you're trying to achieve? Are you just trying to learn what it means to have an ecosystem of a payments processor when you're used to just having like working directly with your bank for your mobile transactions? Or Are you maybe a more advanced customer who's adopted dozens of our products within the ecosystem, and your challenges, your issues, the questions you have are just completely different?
You know, what you said in that, among other things that for me is so important, is this idea of it actually being audience driven. Like, what is the audience you're trying to engage? And I will say this, I think part of this mindset shift around composable content is shifting away from what are we doing and how do we execute on it, and much more toward who is our audience and what really matters to them, and how can we reach them effectively. What are the things that we want to try? What are the things we want to experiment with? And sure, that means A/B testing, but it doesn't just mean A/B testing. It means, those wild and wacky ideas that, are a little bit like the Colonel Sanders virtual dating game, that are actually going to capture people's imagination and attention, and sometimes it is, to your point, Justin, about being exactly where they need to be with the right information when they've got a challenge or a priority. Sometimes it's about entertaining them. Sometimes it's about bringing them into a world that they might not know very much about or might not think they care very much about. There's a huge diversity of stuff that we're trying to do here. Okay, we've talked a bit about consistency for sure. Let's talk a little bit about this whole engagement thing. I mean, okay, Justin, you've got a very specific view on engagement here. And I love that you talked earlier about breaking up, churn. What are the things that you are most focused on in terms of, metrics or priorities and objectives with your audiences that you're engaging? And how are you thinking about that? How does that influence the way you think about creating or using content?
Oh gosh, this is a big question for the amount of time we have left here, but let me give it a shot. I think, like, when it comes down to my team, there's a reason we chose the name customer empowerment. We want everything we do to be focused on and driving towards helping our customers achieve their dreams. It's not about us. It's not about what we need. It's about what we're trying to help our customers unlock in their business. And so when we're talking about small business owners, that can be anything. It could just be, I want to have a side hustle and be the best jam maker in my county. It can also mean that they want to own a multi-chain restaurant that, is multinational and all of these things. How do we address both of those audiences through content and through KPIs while we look at their success? We're asking ourselves, how are we ensuring that when they run into an issue, that we're predicting that they may be running into an issue, and that we're proactively delivering content to them that will help them avoid that issue entirely? Or if we weren't able to predict it, and if we weren't able to be proactive, how are we creating experiences that allow them to get to that answer with speed and ease, so that we're not introducing friction, we're not introducing complexity, we're saying, you just need an answer right now. And then at the same time, for people who just want to learn, right? Because there are many different reasons someone is going to land on your company's website. Maybe they have an issue, maybe they want to learn, maybe they want to buy something new. How do we start to think about the different goals and the KPIs for each of those objectives in terms of what the customer is trying to do in that moment? And how do we deliver the best content experience for that objective? It requires a lot of creative thinking, if you will, I think is another big part of it. It's how do we get to the point of thinking through that journey a little bit more intentionally? How do we measure the pain and the friction that may happen, so that we're holding ourselves accountable to eliminating it for the customer? But we're looking at everything from, what is the objective they're trying to achieve with our solutions? And then how quickly are we helping them adapt and adopt to those things? Whether that's building a new Square Academy so that every customer can onboard into our ecosystem with ease, whether you can afford white glove service or whether it's self-onboarding. Of course, on the support center, thinking about chatbots and automations and artificial intelligence, and how do we leverage all of these things to help our customers achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve in that moment, in that period of time.
It's a lot, but it's one of those things where the more creative thinking, the more constructive, critical thinking you bring to that, the more questions you can answer with less stuff in a lot of ways as well.
And less time.
Yeah.
Everything that Justin just described takes time, but let's be honest. marketing has always taken time. The act of service, the act of content creation has always taken time. And we've always, let's also be honest, composable content has had some really ugly roots, like in its infancy. And by that, I mean, have any of you asked a sales rep what they've done once you send collateral to them? Because way back in the day, come kids, let me take you into the time machine known as the days before digital, where sales reps used to, like, I actually witnessed a sales rep one time taking 3 different ads that had been out in the marketplace, taking scissors, cutting them up, and then putting all the pieces back together. Now, if we're going to be really honest about it, that is kind of composable content, right? Like they cut up like the different headers, the different images, all the different descriptors of what the product was. They put it together on a new piece of paper and then they photocopied it. Like that was a full ad, right? So it is, we've been doing this, parts of our organizations have been doing this for decades, because at the end of the day, everyone who is either a seller who is selling anywhere, a marketer who is marketing anywhere, a service like sales, marketing, it happens everywhere, right? And
Patrick is not happy about going back there.
I'm sorry, Patrick, we got to come back. We're going to go in the Wayback Machine. We're going to all come forward now into a world where we could stop that. But then it also got to that point where they were like, that's also where salespeople, like, I hope there are no salespeople on this, where salespeople are like, I'm really good at marketing. I cut this up. Like, you're like, no, oh my God, you're not. Like, please. So, but the reality here is the reason why marketing didn't come up with 20 incarnations of that ad, 50 incarnations of the text that went onto the FAQ, like all the different places that we think of the bits and pieces we call content. The reason why we didn't do that then is because it took a lot of time. So now if I'm in marketing, right? So for everyone who's sitting on this, who is a marketing lead in a marketing function, if you could think, where are awesome answers coming from? Okay, I've got to tackle this new tutorial on, how to whatever, like make a dating app that has the words finger licking in it that I'm never going to be able to unsee. But anyway, if I've got to come up with content for that, and I've got to explain to people, why do I want this? Why is dating so hard? Where are some of the best answers to the hardest questions coming from in any organization? It's your customer service team. I'm just telling you this right now. Go to the contact center. They have answered every bizarre, weird, 3 a.m. someone's drunk question. And they answer.
There are those. There are absolutely those too. Sometimes very insightful, just going to say.
And they're really great. And that is content. That answer is content. So if we can stop being so rigid around what we want to deliver, and we actually start kind of almost reverse engineering of how is it already being delivered, it gives us another opportunity to open up the doors to be like, okay, wow, if you guys are already creating this, or in a really sassy organization, if this is already happening on a call and you're transcribing all of those calls for quality management and for quality control,
why not
use those snippets?
Exactly.
Yeah, why not use it? Well, okay, so Liz, you're talking about at least 2 things there that I want to follow up on. One is this idea that it's actually about how we're coordinating internally, right? So part of this is about making sure this stuff is visible, is findable, is usable by a lot of different people from across the organization, because exactly what you're saying, like the cut it up and repurpose it, actually has a reason. It's because that sales rep didn't think that what existed was actually meeting the need of the audience, which brings me to point number 2, this whole idea of personalization. And I'm going to say, for the record, one-to-one personalization, I think, is something we're never actually going to see. Like, it maybe exists when you log into your account and you have like a history of what you've done with XYZ company, but like, that's not really ultimately what we're going for. What we're going for is the stuff that feels like it.
You love a birthday email.
I know.
Stop it, Nicole.
Oh my God.
Liz favorite email to get. Personalization. Birthday email.
Especially when they send it to you on the 1st of January because they didn't actually know what your birthday was and they defaulted to the 1st of the year. Just saying.
Dear L, happy birthday.
But this is really the key thing about personalization, right? This is about providing the stuff that feels really personal and contextual and relevant to the person on the receiving end. And it isn't necessarily one-to-one, but it's really about understanding and anticipating their needs. So like Liz, that's like, talk a little more about that, because this is really where this whole composable content thing starts to become super awesome, because like that's the superpower, is how do you not only understand and anticipate what those needs are, but put together the right pieces to actually serve those needs.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that when people think about personalization, we get so down the rat hole of mail merge, like digital mail merge. How do I make it happen faster? And, it's really wrong, because at the end of the day, if you think about all of the pieces, like if you step back for a minute and like take all of, whether it's an asset, whether it's an image, whether it's an awesome headline, whether it's a one-liner that your CEO says all the time that he'd love to see in a banner. We all know that happens, just saying. But take all of those things and like put them up on a wall in no specific order, and then tear down the things that do you no service, right? Just go through that account, tear down, but do it with content. And you can start to see where you have pieces that can come together, that when pieces come together differently, when they're received by the right customer segment who is looking for that answer, who is trying to explore something new, whoever it is, right? All of a sudden that feels more personal for them, because it's about what feels personal,
Yes.
not what fits into the categorization of personalization, right?
Mm.
Because something that I send to Justin that has like dead plants in it, they're like, don't have a green thumb. This is not going to feel personal to Justin. It's going to feel triggering, right? He's going to be like, oh my God, I have all these amazing plants in my background. Stop talking.
Do you think I would kill my plants?
Right.
No.
Like,
No, Justin, we don't.
Right.
Sometimes I do.
I'll send you pictures of what's going on in my plant. I'm just saying, we'll have that discussion later. But if you know that there's something subtle, if you know, like we marketers, we spend so much time playing with segments, right? Like we want to get it down to the micro segment of Chardonnay ninja moms who drive 4-wheel drives and love Thursdays. Like that is.
You just
like,
described me, by the way.
Like, she knows you so well already, Justin.
Right. So now all of a sudden, like all of our emails are going to have wine glasses on it. Like, no. Like, that's not it. But if I send you something that's like, you know what? I know that you've come to one of our training sessions before, and we can't wait to see you again. Here's 2 tickets to our next user event. That is a personal email that's in context to your customer, right? It didn't have to be so personal. It was like, I saw you sitting in the 3rd row and you looked really good. That's the finger looking good Kentucky Fried Chicken app. Like that's that app. That's not personalization.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right? Because like the audience that you're getting with the finger looking good dating app, for them, it totally resonates.
Totally.
The people that gravitate toward that is meaningful for them.
Right. And they're not going to want to see a burger, right? Like so again, it's about those, we love to talk about like moments that matter. Or Nicole, I know there's another favorite. Hey, Justin, want to watch Nicole get triggered? Hang on just a second. Wait, let me just, to get those moments of delight. Yes, I did it.
I don't want to be delighted as a customer, Liz. I want you to meet my expectations.
Right. Like meet my minimum.
Time.
Don't weird me out. Like, don't be creepy.
Don't be creepy,
this all
man.
goes back to Justin's breakup thing. Like, right? Like, I'm breaking up with you because you're a stalker. Because if you used the words, I'm customer obsessed, you might be a stalker. So I'm just saying that in those scenarios, when you think about personalization, I think a lot of times, and again, it goes back to Nicole, what we were talking about earlier. If you think that content is more about the channel through which you want to shove what you want to say, because that's what you need the customer to hear, personalization is going to be more about you than it is about the customer. And if you can flip that paradigm where it's about the customer, what the customer is telling you they expect in their definition of personalization, you will be able to shuffle that content deck so fast and deliver that in the moment that they've told you. And half the time what they're telling you is, I'm about to leave your site. I'm about to leave you. I'm about to break up with you in a sticky note. If you don't get this weird, subtle cue that I'm giving you over here in service, like I've looked through 19 knowledge management pages, I'm still not getting
the answer. Yep. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
Well,
struggling.
so you're hitting, Liz, on, for me, what is really, really the underlying reason why we care about this and why we're even talking about composable content. And again, I say this as the person leading our content team at Contentful, which is, kind of a thing. There is not enough time to create all the stuff that you would have to do if you were just looking at it as like one-to-one personalization. And it doesn't even work, right? So if we're looking at it from the standpoint that you just described, it allows us to do two things really, really well. One is be very clear on what it is we actually need. And a lot of it we probably already have. So how do we pull the right elements of what we already have together in the right combination to actually meet that need? And then the second is, how do we understand what else we might need to create that's actually going to fill the gaps that we can identify? And I just want to use this as an opportunity as we sort of round it out here to bring this maybe to Maria's question, which is, if you're starting a business, what would you say is the most important aspect to prioritize when you're starting to generate content? And I'm going to put a little asterisk on this and say, too, it's probably not even just if you're starting a business, but if you are starting down this path of composable content, which, by the way, is not like an all or nothing kind of thing. You can do it at your own pace, and it doesn't have to cover everything wall to wall from the moment you decide to start down this particular journey. So, Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first on that one. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer will probably feel a little obvious, which is start with your customers, start with the market, understand what are their pain points, what are they trying to solve, what's the thing they're trying to do with your product or your service. It may not always be something like big and magical. Maybe they just want the patchwork Louis, that's perfectly okay. But how do we first understand what they're trying to do so that we can then build our content strategy around helping them do that thing? And I think that goes through, again, every part of the experience. Your marketing needs to start with the solution or the solution to the problem you're trying to solve. And your customer experience content also needs to start with the solution to the problem your customer ran into. And so I think it just really, really comes back to, I think, Liz, you were talking about this. It's like, you really have to know your customer, and you really have to know all of the different aspects of their lives and the ways in which your product or service plays a role in that environment. The one divergent perspective I would share to the earlier conversation around personalization, I'm incredibly excited about generative AI. I think many, many people are, and we're all figuring this thing out together. But I do think there will be some unlock in the combined powers of generative plus composable. Because when you have composable content and you have the power of generative behind it, you have the ability to auto-magically, if you will, take all of those composable pieces and combine them into something that is the answer to the personalized response to what your customer is trying to do. And so I don't think but I'll also be clear, you don't have to try and solve every problem. That would be a fool's errand.
Yep.
You should be aware of many of them, and you should have content that services the majority, but don't try and boil the ocean and solve everything. Focus on one thing at a time and build and build and build.
I love that you touched on the AI point here, Justin, too, because I think it's a really important one. And by the way, a subject that we will be addressing at length in future conversations, much like this, possibly even with Justin too. So it's a big deal, right? Because part of this is that curation and understanding what you have and pulling it together in the right ways at the right time. And sometimes we can't necessarily do that manually. We can't do that at human speed. We need to do it at a faster speed than that to respond to that very human need. So, okay, Liz, final thoughts on this?
I would say everything that Justin said, because I'm just going to go ahead and follow Justin around and steal everything and turn it into a meme, because that's just what I do. I'm really good at that. So it's just everything's going to be like, and I stole this gift.
Reform marketer too, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just going to go take it and steal it. But here's what I will also say for marketers. It's really easy to forget that we actually have two types of customers. We have internal customers as well. So when you're getting to know what your external customer, the one who's like making the transactions, is trying to do, also make sure that you've spent some time trying to understand what your internal customers across the organization are trying to do. Because as you sit there as a marketer, you have to understand that your customer service agents, your success, your customer success people, the teams that are across your organization. If you're in a manufacturing organization, the people in your warehouse, they're all trying to do something very different. They're all trying to get to an end goal, and they might do it a little bit differently. And so that will also help shape that content strategy, because if your customer is trying to do A, and oh, by the way, your call center agent is also trying to do A, but a slightly different variation, you need to understand how that content connection is going to happen. And have we thought through, okay, hey, we actually have something that would be pretty great for that. So it's about understanding both the needs and how the external customer wants to engage, but then how the internal customer needs to engage so that they can make their day and their dreams possible. Because at the end of the day, if our job is to translate the needs of our customer to the realities of our business and the products that we serve and sell, we have to be the ones that make that translation engine possible. And that's where the disconnects in content often have, is like, we think we know what our end customer, but also the person serving that content needs. And we've never asked either, or we've never listened to either.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because, and I see this time and again through so many conversations that I have with customers and with partners and with other experts, it's that all of this stuff raises some really fundamental questions about what we're doing as businesses. And, as we start sorting out the ways that we work with content, with all of these channels and platforms that we're communicating and engaging our audiences through, as we get better and better at how we execute on that, it really uncovers the much more fundamental questions of what are we trying to do in the first place? And how much do we really know? How do we think about our business purpose and mission? What is our strategy? What do we know really about our customers? And as you say, Liz, the people internally that are helping to serve them. These are some big and, honestly, at least in my view, fun questions. Like, that's the cool work. That's the exciting stuff that, by the way, ChatGPT is not going to be able to do for us. So, all right, we're rounding it out here. I just want to say, Jorge, who has been hitting us up with some of the great questions today.
Oh, good.
Leaves us with another one that I think we may just have to follow up on in another conversation, Jorge. But may composable content transform the conversation and continuum of narratives? And I have to say, I think short answer, spoiler alert, yes. More on this to come. But let me leave you all with just a few follow-up resources if you're interested in digging into a little bit more about some of the things that we talked about today. One is, I assure you, an awesome blog post and, frankly, a very interesting learning course that is associated with it, all about content modeling. And this is for content modeling for non-developers. So I suspect a lot of the people that are on the call today are going to find this, at a minimum, somewhat entertaining, hopefully highly educational as well. And if you're interested in learning more about Contentful, our composable content platform, how it works, and actually getting your hands dirty with it a little bit, these are a few more additional resources. You can find out about the things that we announced recently in our spring launch. You can actually join a live demo, which I highly encourage you to do. And if you'd like to take it a step further and actually talk to somebody in a one-to-one conversation more about Contentful and what it might be able to do for you and your organization, please go right ahead. I will say thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today, for your fantastic chat and questions. We love it. And we look forward to seeing you again because, there's a lot more to talk about. By the way, Liz, Justin, I couldn't have done this in anything like this forum without you both. Thank you so, so much for joining us today.
Justin, did we kiki our content off?
I think we did. Thank you, Nicole, and the entire Contentful team, and for everyone who stuck around this long to hear our chaos.
We love it, and we love you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.